what I want to look at with you today is this. When it seems like God has left the building, when it feels like we're all alone and when we can't find him anywhere, what can we do? Where can we find encouragement? And so I want to take us to an animated picture of what I'm calling the believing life with Jesus. And my proposition for us to consider today is this: when the believing life is hard to believe, I want to suggest that God is nearer than you think. In other words, when you struggle to feel connected to God, when you question even if you are connected, I hope that by the end of our time you can answer yes, and then to have some tangible things to take with you as reminders of what the quality of this connection is. So, as you know, the Talbot Chapel series this year is Sola Fide, by faith alone. And today we're going to be in the Gospel of John. And what's interesting about John is that faith as a noun hardly occurs at all. Instead, what you find is the verbal form of faith, to believe, occurring nearly 100 times. This verbal form of believe occurs more in John than any other New Testament writer, including Paul. And so what we're going to look at is this theme of belief in John. And in fact, what he writes as his purpose for writing is so that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. And he writes that to all who receive him, to those who believe in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. And then when the crowds asked Jesus, what works must we do to do the works that God requires? He says, just one work: believe. So John's very purposeful about inviting the response of belief in Jesus, but he takes it even further, because throughout his gospel, he provides vivid imagery of what this believing life looks like. It goes beyond that first step that you take. It goes beyond that first prayer. It goes beyond that first altar call. It goes beyond that moment when you cross over from death to life. It is a believing life that we step into. And so we're going to be looking at John 15, which I think is a pretty familiar passage where the vine and the branches present us with one of these animated pictures of the believing life. And so when we ask that question, God, are you there? I hope that we find at the end that we will say, yes, you are. And on top of that, what is the quality of that presence? So let's set the context for the passage. This happens shortly before Jesus goes to the cross. He sits down to have a chat with his disciples. It's after he has washed their feet in John 13. It is after Judas has been dismissed to go initiate the betrayal. And Jesus begins to give his disciples some final instructions. And he's like, okay, you guys, I'm getting ready to leave you. And where I'm going, you cannot come. And his disciples are like, wait, what? You're going, and why can't we follow you? And what are we going to do when you're gone? And so Jesus' response is, actually, I will be with you even though I'm not with you, which I think touches on the question we're asking today a little bit, right? This, how do we understand that he's with us when he's not with us? And so one of the ways that he illustrates this is John 15. So as I read the passage, which is on the screen there, try to imagine the scene. Jesus says to them, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away, and every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. So let's unpack it a little bit. First things first, Jesus says, I am. This is his thing in John. Throughout John's gospel, Jesus repeats these I am statements, which connects back to God's own divine declaration in the Old Testament. So in essence, others recognize this as a divine claim. But then Jesus gets fancy. He expands it into a metaphor. He says, I am the vine, right? And metaphors, I don't know about you, I love metaphors, because metaphors, especially when your feelings go missing, when your heart's disconnected from your head, a metaphor gets underneath that block. It invites your imagination to puzzle and go, what does it mean that Jesus is a vine? Right? You have to think about that. What are the properties of a vine that get mapped onto Jesus? And so at the very basic level, Jesus is this trailing grapevine, right? And we are the branches connected to the vine. But notice that he says not only that he is the vine, but that he is the true vine. What is that about, right? If you are a Jewish reader or a listener to his words, you're like, oh, the vine, I know that, I've heard that. It's like a familiar song. It's like, oh, I know that tune, right? The vine is all over the Old Testament, and every time you read about the vine in the Old Testament, most every time Israel is the vine, and God has high hopes for his people Israel. God is said to tend the vine, and the problem is Israel is unfaithful, and Israel fails to bear good fruit. So when Jesus comes in and says, I am the true vine, the implication is that Jesus is sent in to fulfill what Israel could not. Jesus as the true vine becomes the very locus of the people of God. So Jesus says, I am the true vine, right? But what's exciting about this picture is that it's more than a metaphor about just Jesus, because we're invited into it, right? We are the branches in the vine. It's a statement not only about who Jesus is, but it's a statement about how Jesus saves. Our lives are sustained by Jesus. And so the vine and the branches present this salvific picture of the believing life with Jesus. Now, climb into the metaphor a little bit more, settle into the soil, and I want to talk about the implications. What this means is that if you consider yourself a believer, you are fully connected to Jesus right now, no matter what you might feel about it. And I know some of you are like, duh, knew that, learned it in Sunday school. Like, you knew that. But some of us, I don't know, we give our lives to Christ, and then later on we question if it actually took. I don't know about you. Like when my kids were little at the dinner table, I had one child. She would excuse herself every night, and she'd go off to the corner and she would pray to ask Jesus into her heart every night, just in case it didn't work the last night, right? Or if you ever went to camp and every summer you raised your hand to pray the prayer, right? And I mean, it's kind of a silly illustration, and I don't mean to make light of it, but how many of us work double time because we think we have to work for what Jesus already paid for? How many of us worry that if we stop working, we will fall out of his favor? So we operate as if we might lose our abiding connection with him? Or how many of us, when it feels like he is distant, we run around to strengthen what we feel like is it's not a very secure connection? But the imagery is very clear. The believing life means that you are already connected, the branch to the vine. The believing life means that you are united with Jesus, and your job, stay there. Don't move. Stay connected to him. You're already participating in the believing life, and as you are joined to Jesus, the I am, your belief is expressed by staying there. John calls it abiding. Now, Jesus is about to define abiding and what it means. Abiding is not just doing nothing, but this first part is for those of us who are running around trying to create a connection that is already there, trying to earn favor that is already ours, or trying to secure salvation that is already secure. You are secure. You are as close to him as anyone can get. And your job is just to abide, to stay there. So now let's define abide more carefully. Jesus says abiding looks like love. What is the shape of this love? To love is to obey. Verse 10, if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. So as Jesus abides in the love of the Father, we can abide in Jesus' love. And part of how we abide in Jesus is through obedience. which happens as we remain close to Jesus. When I was in this spiritual desert, I would go to church and I'd listen to a pastor give the message, and all I would experience was boring words and dry content. And I'd stand there and I'd try to sing, but I didn't feel any joy. And I'd look around and I'd wonder if everyone was as happy as I was faking that I was. And I wondered, were they sure that God was present? They looked like they believed it. Why wasn't he there for me? And I was tempted to stop showing up. I wondered if it would matter anymore if I showed up or not. It was hard to believe that I was a branch abiding in the vine because I couldn't see any signs of growth. All I felt was disconnection. But as we established, as branches on the vine, our connection is secure, right? And if our connection is secure, it means that we are growing even if we can't see it. Have you ever tried to watch a plant grow? It's kind of boring, unless you have a time-lapse video, right? The growth is always happening. Just because it's quiet, just because no one seems to be moving, doesn't mean he is not working to grow fruit. Again, the animated picture of abiding in the vine is not very exciting to the naked eye unless you watch it like this, right? Remember in verse 1, Jesus says that our Father is the gardener tending the vine. He is always tending the vine, no matter how slow the growth may feel. He's doing a work, and he is near. So for me, honestly, seminary, being assigned to read the Bible and to write papers about it, I know you guys are like, it's an assignment. I deal with this in my classes, like it's an assignment, right? It actually saved my connection with Jesus while I was in the desert, because there I am sitting in classes doing homework, right, in the Gospels and Colossians, different books, and I was forced to figure out meanings and applications of the text. My mind was engaged while my heart struggled, but somehow this ongoing engagement sustained me. It was not as appetizing in the moment, but it sustained me. And I think sometimes in life when we question his presence, the best we can do is simply show up to our lives day by day. Whenever I struggled to believe God was near, I just kept going to class, one foot in front of the other. I kept showing up to my church community on Sunday. And do you know what changed? Not much for a while. It went on for a long time. But eventually, I stopped faking it. I stopped pretending that things were okay. And I realized that just showing up on a given day, that was my offering of worship to the Lord. I made it. I'm here, right? I stopped trying to perform, and that is when I was able to offer my true heart to God, and that's when he really began to address me in the places he wanted to address me. And I acknowledge sometimes it's hard to keep showing up to class, show up to family, show up to friends, show up to worship, show up to God, show up to life itself. It's not easy, but when we do, I think that we invite his nourishment in those moments. So the Father is always tending the garden. Do you trust him enough to keep showing up and expecting that the fruit will come? To abide is to love is to obey on even our hardest days is to simply show up. So, the believing life is secure. The believing life is marked by love. Third, the believing life is marked by friendship. Maybe as you question why God is distant, you wonder if it's because he doesn't want to be near. What if the thought for you of his nearness is actually not a comfort to you at all? Sometimes I think we don't question his presence, we fear it, or we dread it, or we avoid it. Maybe when you think of your connection with Jesus, you like to think of yourself as that little trailing vine back in the corner, like hidden from view, and you're not really sure if you want to catch the gardener's eye, because if you do, you might find out what he really feels about you, or he might change his mind about you. In other words, do you ever question this abiding life because you're not sure if he loves you, or you're not sure if he likes you? Or maybe you feel that you're constantly falling short of a certain standard, or you're constantly struggling with a certain sin, and so you just catch yourself thinking you're just not that presentable, right? Or maybe you're just less of a priority to him. But in John 15:15, Jesus says this. He says, "No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you." Part of what's happening in this farewell conversation is that Jesus is establishing the disciples' new role. And he's saying, not only are we branches to a vine, but we're friends. And friendship, we know friendship, right? We know how to be friends with each other. What do friends do, right? Friends enjoy spending time together. Friends share their hearts with each other. They share their joys and their sorrows together. Friends share their secrets with each other. If you notice in the passage, Jesus says that a servant doesn't know his master's secrets, but we're friends, and I'm telling you the secrets of the Father, right? We are friends, and friends are for each other. So how is our abiding life with Jesus marked by friendship? I'm going to give us 3 things. First, Jesus, our friend, is relatable. Think about Jesus washing feet. Feet. Right? I mean, not only is Jesus offering a kind of prefiguring of what he will accomplish on the cross, notice he calls them clean, but think about the intimacy of this gesture. Jesus gets down on their level, and what he does is actually unprecedented. He breaks personal space, he breaks social rank, and he grasps their dirty, stinky feet. He's familiar, right? Jesus is our familiar friend. This is a humble gesture picturing Jesus as coming near as our friend. Second, Jesus, our friend, is for us. He's for us. You know that he doesn't overlook you. You're not the hidden, forgotten branch. He's actually excited to call you friend. I don't know if you've ever participated in one of those big group photos with a bunch of friends, and you're that person who gets pushed up to the back, and you're behind all the tall people, and in the picture, all that shows is like your left eye. If you're that person. Jesus is down on the bottom, and he's like, look, I can't see everyone in this picture. You, come down to the front, right? He hasn't forgotten you. Or maybe you feel like you're Bartholomew, and you're like, who? Bartholomew, do you know he's one of the 12 disciples? What do we know about Bartholomew? Nothing. I don't know anything about Bartholomew. Do we know, what did he do? No idea. The one thing we know, Jesus washed his feet. Or ladies, maybe you feel like you're Mary. Mary, the mother of Jesus? No, the other Mary. Mary Magdalene? No, the other Mary. Mary of Bethany? No, the other Mary, right? Did you know there was another Mary at the resurrection that Jesus appeared to? Jesus is our friend. He hasn't forgotten us. He doesn't overlook us. He loves us and he likes us. And I hope that we can remember that when we feel forgettable to God. There's no chance we're forgettable. So that's number 2. Jesus, our friend, is relatable. Jesus, our friend, is for us. Number 3, we are friends together as branches. If you think about that metaphor, there are lots of branches on this vine. So as friends of Jesus, we are friends together. And because of this, I think we can always be looking out for each other, especially when others experience God as absent. In your life, who is the person who might need the friendship that you can provide that reminds them that God is near? When I was an undergrad, I had this group of friends. Like, I loved these friends. Like, we found each other freshman year, and there were 8 of us. So we called ourselves the Crazy Eights. Like, I think after the card game, but also we fancied ourselves as being like really adventuresome. And we took this camping trip every year. And in retrospect, I thought it was super adventuresome, but I have a sweatshirt that says indoorsy, so not that it was just a camping trip. So anyway, we would take this camping trip, just the 8 of us, but every year I had one friend, and she would invite 2 or 3 extra people. on this camping trip. There were people in her circle that she thought, we share such a special friendship together and they need a friend, and so she would invite them to come on this camping trip. And do you know what I thought about that? I'm an introvert. How do you think I thought about that? Who are these intruders on my camping trip? You are gonna screw up the whole trip, right? Like you're disturbing the balance of my friends, right? I know, I'm super mean. But Jesus, I think Jesus is like that one friend of mine who's outward facing, always looking for the person who doesn't have the kind of friendship that we have with God. What does it look like to be branches on the vine together who are always looking for those people who need to experience the love of Jesus? I think, I'm going to keep moving. I had more things to say. I'm going to keep moving. I think I'm looking at the time. So just to kind of conclude, to wrap up where we've been, this believing life, it involves an ongoing, abiding union with Jesus, right? As branches connected to the vine. And so when we feel alone, when we feel abandoned by God, how can we go forward? Climb into the garden. Remember that the Father is always tending the branches, and God is nearer than you feel. And let's remember that our connection with him is secure, that abiding looks like love, and we are called his friends. And then let's finally keep in mind that we are all branches together. That in this union of presence and friendship, how can we embody this kind of welcome, this kind of presence, this kind of friendship to others?
Discover who you're called to be at Biola University, a leading Christ-centered university in Los Angeles, with programs on campus and online. Subscribe for more of our videos and learn more at biola.edu.